Two boys secretly swapped their teacher's birthday candles for firecrackers. Because of that, they were both expelled from school. Decades went by. One of them had become a wealthy, successful painter, while the other was a retired railway worker still struggling to make ends meet. The celebrated painter returned to the countryside to enjoy his retirement and wanted to hire a gardener to tend to his overgrown yard. To his surprise, the man who showed up for the interview was his old classmate, the one he'd set off firecrackers with all those years ago. Thanks to their childhood friendship, the gardener landed the job without any trouble. And from that point on, both of their fates took a dramatic turn. As soon as he started, the gardener began carefully planning out the patch of wasteland in front of the painter's house. In his eyes, that overgrown plot was already heavy with fruit. He could almost smell the harvest in the air. Though he wasn't wealthy, he had a warm heart and paid close attention to every detail of life. Even an ordinary sickle had to be chosen with care. The painter didn't understand. It was just a basic tool for cutting weeds. But to the gardener, it was his way of conversing with all of nature. A good sickle, when cutting grass, should make a crisp sound, and its weight and balance had to be just right. Otherwise, his arms and back would tire easily. Whatever task he took on, the gardener threw himself into it completely. The painter, on the other hand, preferred to observe the world around him and paint everything he saw.
Ah, tu regardes jamais le soleil se coucher, les étoiles, la brume?
La brume? Quand il y a de la brume, il n'y a pas grand-chose à voir.
The painter showed the gardener his work and talked about how he'd spent the years in between. The gardener listened, spellbound. It was a life completely unlike his own, as dazzling as floating on clouds, like a dream. In the public eye, the painter had achieved fame and fortune, but in truth, he was trapped on an island called self, in the throes of a massive midlife crisis. Though his paintings grew more valuable by the day, he had lost the pure joy he once felt when painting. For distraction, he'd had flings with several models, which drove his wife to decide on a divorce. But the painter still thought his wife was being unreasonable. In his view, physical affairs were just a game. As long as his heart still belonged to her, that was what mattered. The gardener didn't argue out loud, but in his heart he disagreed. There's more to the world than love. There's also a husband's responsibility. For his family, he worked hard every day, quit drinking and smoking, and used the money he saved to take his family on a seaside vacation every year. They couldn't afford anything fancy, but watching his wife bathed in sunlight, he felt it was all worth it. They couldn't stay in a luxurious ocean view room, so they'd have the free lunch the hotel gave out, take a leisurely nap, and then sit together by the sea in the evening, enjoying the breeze. To him, that was the most comfortable thing in the world. The gardener showed the painter a different way of living, and as they spent more time together, the two seemed to rediscover the brotherly bond they'd had as kids. When the gardener came to work, he would sometimes bring some bread to the painter. To avoid dirtying the house, he'd take off his shoes, and inside those yellow rain boots weren't socks, but the house slippers his wife had sewn for him by hand. After learning that the gardener neither drank nor coffee, the painter bought him some tea instead. The gardener couldn't figure out why the painter had come back to such a remote place. The painter said it was his hometown. His father had wanted him to take over the family pharmacy, but his dream was to paint. They couldn't see eye to eye, so he'd run away and never come back, until 3 years ago when his parents passed away and he returned. Only then did he discover that his father had also painted quite a few landscapes, and they were just as good as his own. But to make a living, his father had given up painting. At the time, he hadn't understood why, but now he did. His father hadn't had the courage to say no. He had been forced to shoulder the entire family's burden, and had no choice but to let it go. And the painter realized that it was precisely because of his father's sacrifice that he himself had been free to chase his dream. Now his own home was in chaos, and he was sick of all the socializing in Paris, so he'd chosen to return to his hometown for some peace, hoping to find his old self again, because he didn't want the gardener to call him boss. They agreed that the gardener would call him Mr. Brush, and he would call the gardener Mr. Garden. Though the gardener knew nothing about art, he possessed a wisdom born from years of life experience. Even under a clear blue sky, the gardener would look up and remind him to take an umbrella. The painter dismissed it as nonsense, but he'd barely driven a short distance before the sky suddenly darkened, and rain poured down in sheets. The gardener's uncanny accuracy left the painter in complete awe. After some time, the painter returned from Paris, to find that the gardener had not only grown rows of tender green vegetable seedlings on the land he'd planned out, but had also repainted all the faded, peeling patches on the old house's walls. The whole place looked brand new. Seeing all of this, the painter felt that this old friend, who knew nothing about art, was the true master of life. The gardener was never late, but one morning, he showed up late. The painter didn't mind, but the gardener still apologized, explaining that his son-in-law had lost his job, and the whole family was anxious. His daughter had been crying to him all morning, which had delayed his departure. The painter thought it was no big deal. He could just find another job.
Les emplois, c'est comme les tigres, ne pour ainsi dire plus.
Écoute, s'il a de la volonté, un peu de capacité dans divers domaines.
Et aujourd'hui, les jeunes, si on les met dehors, c'est dehors pour longtemps. Et dehors de tout.
Seeing how worried the gardener looked, the painter immediately called a friend, and used his connections to line up a decent new job for the gardener's son-in-law. The gardener was deeply grateful. The next day, to show his gratitude, the gardener brought over some carefully grown vegetables, and even used a projector to show the painter photos of his family, telling story after heartwarming story about them over the years. Listening to him talk on and on, the painter felt as though he had lived a whole different life alongside the gardener, and as the two spent more time together, the gardener came to realize that the painter wasn't as carefree as he appeared. To make money, he had to paint needle mediocre stuff that would sell. What bothered him even more was doing commission portraits. It made him feel like a painting machine. But the gardener thought that earning money so easily was something many people would envy. Besides, the soul of a painting lies in the eye of the beholder. So what the painter found boring might bring plenty of joy to the person buying it. Looking at it from that angle, the painter felt a little light.